Hi, this is Chris with Nightfall Audiobooks, and I have for you something a bit different today. Thrift Store Horror is my collaborator on the channel. I use them for resources on what to read next and how to get books that I'm missing. And in some cases, I'm tracking down the wrong book entirely because it's the UK release and I already have the United States release. Anyway, recommendation was 13 Tales of Horror by 13 Masters of Horror. This is a compilation novel. It's all short stories. I have not read this before, but it came highly recommended by Thrift Store Horror. So we have stories by R.L. Stine, Caroline B. Cooney, Christopher Pike, D.E. Atkins, A. Bates, J. Bennett, Carol Ellis, Diane Ho, Lael Littke, Sinclair Smith, J.B. Stamper, Ellen Emerson White, and Patricia Windsor. Half of these authors have worked with Scholastic and Point Horror in the past. This should be pretty fun. And we all know about R.L. Stine and Christopher Pike, right? Believe it or not, I haven't really read any Diane Ho, or Sinclair Smith, or Caroline B. Cooney, but I do have a Cooney novel in the works, so stay tuned for that. I will be reading one story from this compilation and then publishing that as its own episode. I'm going to use this book like glue. If there's any holes or gaps or weirdness going on in my schedule, I'll be using one of these stories to fill that void. Just something fun to do. So let's begin. If you would like to get in touch with me, you can write me an email, nightfallaudiobooks@gmail.com. I am also on YouTube at Nightfall Audiobooks. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the join button to show your support. I also have a Patreon page, patreon.com/nightfallaudiobooks. So tell your friends, tell your mom, tell whoever you think would like to listen to me narrate them a story. Thank you very much for listening, and let's begin. Welcome to a Nightfall Audiobooks production of The Boy Next Door by Ellen Emerson White. Winter in New England was much too cold for ice cream, but the show must go on, the store must stay open, and Dorothy was working from 4 to 9. The closing shift. It was boring to work by herself, but they weren't getting enough business for her boss to justify paying extra staff. It was very boring. A few parents, divorced fathers mostly, brought their kids her pre-bedtime cones. Some sorority girls from the university rushed in to get a cake for a birthday that had been forgotten. She talked them into the 12-inch instead of the 9 because, well, they were supposed to sell up. When someone asked for a cone of chocolate chip or whatever, she was supposed to say, "Yes, sir. Would that be a medium?" Because suggesting a large cone would be making customers nervous and inclined to say, No, just a small." But medium sounded so harmless, so average. The same way $1.99 sounded so much less expensive than $2. As memory served, W.C. Fields had a theory about that. 2 couples came in double dating. The girls were, quite vocally, watching their weights, so they decided on small Diet Cokes. The guys didn't seem too happy about that, and there was a lot of discussion before all 4 of them finally ordered sundaes. "No nuts on mine," one of the girls added quickly, which would be a not inconsiderable savings in calories, considering that they were butter toasted, but a rather paltry saving in the scheme of the overall sundae. Dorothy, however, just managed to keep her mouth shut and made the sundaes, rang them up, gave back the change, rinsed the 2 scoops she'd used. Business was slow and dull, although there were worse things than getting paid minimum wage for doing physics homework. Around 7:30, her friend Jill came in, best friend actually. They had met in kindergarten, and became instantly inseparable because they were the only 2 in the class who could read, and looking at DOG and CAT flashcards was dull. "Ennui," Jill had said more than once. "Our friendship is founded on ennui." Not that she had a flair for the dramatic or anything. In many ways, they were exact opposites. Jill was tall, she was short. Jill was blonde, she had dark hair. Jill liked art, she liked science. But by the time they had gotten around to noticing that they had very little in common, they were already such close friends that it didn't matter. "So," Jill said, leaning heavily against the counter, "what do I get free?" Dorothy grinned and pointed in the direction of the drinking fountain. "Think I'll pass?" Jill said, and took off her mittens. Lumpy-looking mittens, but then again, she'd made them herself, and Dorothy had to give her points for that. "It's really cold out. Are people actually coming in here?" Dorothy shook her head. "No." Jill hung over the glass counter, looking at the various tubs. "Is that one new?" she asked, pointing. "Yeah, licorice." Dorothy reached for a little wooden pedal. "Want to try it? It's even worse than pumpkin." Jill tasted the spoonful, then nodded. "It's almost as bad as Cinnamon Crunch?" Dorothy nodded, took the paddle back, and threw it away. Jill unzipped her jacket slightly, then zipped it back up. I was kind of surprised there were so many people, she said. The funeral. Small town, Dorothy said. Almost everyone knew everyone else, so when someone died, or was born, or played Little League, or had a yard sale, a lot of people showed up. So even though Mrs. Crichton had been an absolutely terrible teacher, a complete terror when you got right down to it, the church had been packed. The funeral had been over the weekend, but that didn't mean that everyone wasn't still talking about it. Yeah, Jill said and frowned. I'm just always surprised. I mean, no one likes you while you're alive, but then you die, and suddenly everyone's lining up to give eulogies. It's strange. Dorothy nodded. Very strange. I really don't like funerals, Jill said. Dorothy nodded. No argument there. Well, Jill straightened up. Think you'll get out of here in time for Miss America? Dorothy looked around the empty store. Unless I get a rush. Right, Jill grinned and also looked around. Well, if you do, come by or call me up. I have a feeling it's Miss Rhode Island this year. Highly unlikely. I'm going with the Pacific Northwest, Dorothy said. Miss Oregon, maybe. Not that she had any idea of what the contestants looked like, or really even cared much. Not a chance, Jill said, unless they have a really good talent. She paused. I can't remember why we wait all year to watch it. Well, not for the baton twirling. Because we each secretly want to be Miss Congeniality, Dorothy said. Oh, right. Jill put her mittens back on and headed for the door. Don't work too hard. Dorothy nodded and, finished with her physics homework, reached for her calculus book. The store manager, Howard, stopped by at 8:30 to grumble about the lack of money in the register and take most of it back to the safe. Then he came back out to remind her about turning off the heat under the hot fudge and butterscotch, being sure to rotate the ice cream sandwiches when she restocked, and to remember to turn on the alarm system before she left. She nodded, already at work refilling the jimmies, sprinkles, ants. Everyone who came in had a different name for them. By the time she locked up, promptly at 9 o'clock, she only had to tip the chairs up on top of the tables, mop the floor, and spray clean the glass on the display cases. Howard hated fingerprints. Small children sometimes even left face prints. It was 10 after 9 when someone knocked on the door. She pointed to the closed sign, then saw that it was Matt Wilson, who she had known since 3rd grade. They had even gone on a date, once, to the movies. Freddy Krueger. Not exactly her idea of a thrill, although Matt had liked it just fine. She had kissed him pleasantly good night, and since then they had treated each other with mutual vague disinterest. Had some of the same classes, ended up at the same football parties, said hi if they ran into each other at the mall. Other than that, they rarely spoke. She didn't particularly want to let him in, but if she didn't, it was the sort of thing that would get around school, and everyone would think she was a, "Do you really care what people think?" Jill would say, and she would probably answer that she did more than she didn't. Besides, it was pretty cold out there. Hi, she said, unlocking the door. I kind of have to close up. Matt nodded, coming in. Since she remembered him as a skinny 10-year-old in maroon tough-skin jeans, it was always sort of a shock to realize that he was 6 feet tall now, had a much deeper voice, and possibly even shaved. Hard to believe it was the same guy who had thrown up on the bus, all over the bus, when they had gone on a field trip to the aquarium in the 6th grade. You want anything? She asked, before I finished scooping down. She went back behind the counter, and back to the chocolate walnut fudge, which was frozen rock solid and unyielding. They make you work alone? He asked. Well, we aren't exactly thriving lately, she said, gesturing toward the empty parking lot. Well, empty except for her parents' station wagon. Matt nodded, looking around, shifting his weight from one high top to the other, looking around some more. Call her prescient, but she was getting a bad feeling here. Matt, she said, I can make you something fast, but then I really have to lock up. Now he looked at her, and his eyes seemed a little funny. Too bright or too something, jumpy. I want to see what it's like, he said quietly. Make that a very bad feeling. Oh yeah, she said. The thing is, my manager is going to show up, and if you're in here, I'm going to get in trouble. He shook his head. Come on. She started to move out from behind the counter again. I don't want to lose my job. He shook his head. I saw him. He already left. He'd been watching. Great. And her car was the only one out there, so he must have parked somewhere else. Must have been planning this, whatever it was. She glanced down at the little metal ice cream spatula she was holding. It wasn't much as weapons went, then glanced in the direction of the wall phone, a good 15 feet, and it had a dial, not push buttons, so it would take her longer to get an operator. Well, gosh, time to get distracting. After all, she'd known the guy since 3rd grade. How dangerous could he really be? Matt, if you don't take off, she said, I'm never going to make it home in time for Miss America. He just looked at her. And neither are you, she said. He didn't say anything. Keep talking. Well, okay, I see your point, she said, nodding. You've probably already missed the swimsuits. He looked at her with very little expression, slight eagerness maybe. Open the register. She stared at him. What? Open the register, he said. This was scary, but this was also weird. What do you mean? She asked. There's almost nothing in there. No one buys ice cream in weather like this. Open the damn register, he said. Oh, and give you the whole $20? She asked. If there's even that much. His fist came out unexpectedly and knocked the glass donation jar off the counter. It landed with a shattering crash, change rolling all over the floor, which was scary, but it made her a little mad, too. That's for crippled children, she said. You really going to take money from crippled children? He looked at her with the same strange, blank expression. On top of which, she said, I just swept. He came over the counter with an easy, athletic motion, landing right in front of her. And, under the circumstances, it occurred to her that 6 feet was pretty big, a good 10 inches and at least 80 pounds bigger than she was. The small metal spatula probably wasn't going to tip the odds. Not that it wouldn't be worth a try. But she would keep it as a trump card. Matt, this is really weird, she said. Are Nicky and Fred and all those guys outside, and you're all just pulling my leg here? Because I really want to close up. He reached into his jacket pocket, expensive Gore-Tex, and brought out a gun, a handgun, which he pointed at her. I want to know what it's like, he said. Well, this was just going from bad to worse, wasn't it? Why don't you help yourself to the 20, she said, indicating the register. Take the money for muscular dystrophy, too. In fact, she pulled a $5 bill out of her jeans. Take this. Get yourself a couple of Big Macs. He didn't even seem to hear that, holding the gun and smiling slightly. I've always wanted to know what it's like, he said. This had moved beyond weird, past ominous, and straight to dire. The thing to do was stay calm. I don't know, Matt, Dorothy said, putting the $5 bill back. This is turning into a bad after-school special, know what I mean? Since he was just standing there, smiling, he probably didn't know what she meant. Okay, time to go into a holding pattern, since she really wasn't enjoying looking at a gun that might not be loaded. Well, she said, I think I'll... He stuck the gun into the back of her uniform shirt. I think you'll shut up. Okay, she shut up. I'll take the money, he said, and twisted the spatula out of her hand. It fell into the ice cream case, out of reach, after, to make it look like a robbery. Okay, she said, checking the quiet street outside. Since everything was closed, there wasn't much reason for anyone to drive by, even one of the few town police cars. But you'd better hurry, because my father is going to be coming to pick me up. He jabbed the gun into her back, then pointed with it at her car, out in the snowy parking lot. I know, she said, dead battery. He jabbed her harder with the gun. Shut up. Well, it had been worth a try. She shrugged and shut up. There was going to be a point at which she was going to have to take the situation a little more seriously, start panicking, but she wasn't there yet. This was, after all, a guy who had always tried and failed to cheat off her in 8th grade earth science. I'm going to kill you, he said. There it was, her cue to take this seriously. See, his smile widened a little. I've always wondered what it would be like, to kill someone. So I'm going to do it, find out, and the police will just think it's a robbery, see? She edged a step away from him. I really want to. Always have, he said. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and, what it would feel like, and I think, he grinned a little, I've been planning this, Well, she certainly knew now. Boy, she said, keeping her voice calm, and people say it isn't dangerous for MTV to show all those violent images. He didn't seem to think that was funny. Somehow she wasn't surprised. Look, I don't know if you're kidding, Matt, she said, but either way, I think you should consider intensive psychotherapy. He didn't seem to think that was funny either. Okay if I sit down for a minute, Matt, she asked, considering how long we've known each other? Sure. He laughed again. We got at least 30 minutes, an hour, I figure, before anyone thinks it's funny the lights are still on in here. It would also probably be that long before her parents got worried enough to call or show up. They didn't like the idea that she closed up alone on weeknights. They were always afraid that something bad might happen. In the future, She was going to have to take those sorts of concerns more seriously. On the floor, he said, so no one will see us if they go by. Right there. He indicated for her to sit down against the counter, and then he sat down too, looking pleased with himself, his back resting against the soft ice cream machine. Her head hurt in a numb sort of way. Want a dish of cinnamon crunch? She asked. It's really good. He scowled at her. You better start being scared. It's not as fun if you're not scared. Exactly. She resisted the urge to rub her temples. So, if you're a robber, how do you get in? Would I really have opened the door? He gestured with the gun. I'll break the glass on my way out. Oh, wouldn't I have heard you? She asked. I'll turn the radio up, he said. Oh. See? His eyes brightened even more. It looks fun when they do it, when you see the films of it. So I want to see what it's like, to do it. What had he been doing? Sitting at home watching reenactments on America's Most Wanted, taping shows like that so he could watch them over and over? He seemed so normal, the neighbors would say. So polite, the boy next door. Shouldn't you work your way up? Start off by, I don't know, throwing rocks at seagulls? He smiled. I killed a dog. Oh. She rubbed her hand across her forehead, thoughts about aspirin. But, I didn't feel anything, he said. I didn't feel good or bad, or maybe because I used a car. Maybe if I'd really done it myself. So I'm really going to do this, and then I'll know. The thing she had to keep in mind here was that Matt Wilson wasn't exactly the brightest guy she had ever known. So keep him talking. Did we really have that bad a time on our date? She asked. He didn't say anything, just stood there, looking at her, holding the gun with great confidence. Familiarity, pleasure. Well, quick on the uptake wasn't going to go on his tombstone. I don't want to be trite, she said, but why me? Such a nice boy, the elderly neighbor would tell Maury Povich. Always shoveled my walk. Because you're not special, he said. Oh, not exactly the answer she had expected. Her breath got stuck somewhere inside her throat, and it was an effort to swallow. You know what I mean? He said, leaning forward. You're just there. Like, I know you and I see you around, but I don't give you any thought. Like, if you weren't there, I don't think I'd really notice. He frowned. I don't think anyone really will. After the first couple of weeks, or maybe not even that long, The feeling's mutual, she said stiffly. Nice to have her entire existence reduced to a footnote, a memorial page in the yearbook, if that. Like, he didn't even seem to hear her, too far into his own crazed little reverie. They'll be sad at school, at first, and they'll have, counselors come so everyone can talk about how sad they are, and then, he snapped his fingers. Next thing you know, spring training will be starting. The fact that he just might be right was almost more terrifying than the rest of this. People's lives were getting pretty disposable these days. Even if you died in a really interesting way, you still might not make the evening news. So I do you, he said, and big deal. They shouldn't have had you working here alone at night, 'cause you got robbed by some hopped-up junkie with he made a handshake on the gun, quick trigger finger. He had been thinking about this. What a waste of limited brain power, because it would look like a robbery gone bad. Like her mother always said, plenty of bad things happened in small towns, not just big cities, but the difference was, in a small town, you knew the people. Her head hurt. She wanted to go home. The floor was filthy. What about fingerprints? She asked. He grinned. Haven't touched anything. And if I do have to, with his free hand, he took a pair of winter gloves out of his pocket to show her. Well, she leaned back against the cold white counter. There was a small chocolate smudge, maybe knee-high. That's good. You thought of almost everything. I've thought of everything, he said, and glanced at his watch. I want you to lie down now, hands behind your head. Oh, great, execution style. He must have been renting gangster movies. It was important to keep in mind that she really was smarter than he was. Maybe not special, but definitely smarter. What you haven't thought about, she said, is what it's really like to kill someone. It is easy, but it's pointless, even if it's personal. He scowled at her. Shut up, I'm getting tired of you. Yeah, but... She lowered her voice, carefully, as though there were someone else around to hear. I know what I'm talking about. He scowled at her, but uneasily. Okay, good, keep it up. Even if the person probably should die, she said, even if you have a serious grudge against them, it doesn't seem to matter, because it doesn't change anything. You do it, and you don't feel better. You just feel nothing. Like with the dog. You feel it's a waste. You risk so much, and you don't get anything back. What do you know about it? He asked, but at least he was listening. Okay, she got his attention. Time to bring out the big guns. I know more than you think, she said, but we have to have a deal. If I tell you, you have to leave here and no one will ever know about this, because we'll each have something to hold over each other, so we can just keep it to ourselves. He frowned at her suspiciously. You just don't want me to kill you. God, he was dense. Well, obviously, she said. Would I really be stupid enough to tell you about this otherwise? He frowned, pointed the gun. Tell me what? Dorothy took a deep breath, then let it out. I killed Mrs. Crichton. He sat up straighter, then shook his head. Oh, yeah, right. Nice try. You're just like stalling. No, she was trolling her line out, trying to get him hooked. You want to know what it was like? She asked. Stuff nobody else knows? He didn't say yes, but you could tell he was starting to get a little curious, intrigued. Think about it, Matt, she said. We were all in her class together, 5th grade. Think about what a terrible teacher she was. She was really mean to me, remember? He frowned. No, like, she was mean to everyone? Yeah, well, I didn't like it. She paused, for great effect. And I waited a long time to get back at her. It was quiet for a few seconds, the hum of the freezers sounding loud. She was in an accident, Matt said. Just a dumb accident on the ice. Dorothy nodded. That's right. I wanted it to look like an accident, the same way you want this to look like an accident. Hooked? Or just still nibbling at the bait? He glanced at his watch, then looked back at her, grinning. Okay, he said. Let's see how far you can take this, huh? Hooked. First, promise not to tell anyone, she said. He laughed. Like I'm really going to tell anyone what you said while I was killing you? Okay, so she wasn't making as many inroads as she thought. I'm not kidding, Matt, she said. I'm making a deal here, and admit it. You want to hear about it. I'm the one holding the gun, he said. I'm the only one who can make deals. Fine. She folded her arms across her chest. Go ahead and shoot, before you run out of time. He shook his head, looking very amused. Stupidly amused. No, I want to hear about your big wow murder plot first. Well, it was the only hand she had, so she might as well play it out, go for broke. You know how the road curves there? She said. Everyone in town knew about that curve, above the ocean, and that's the way she would have to drive, to get home. And, well, I know what her car looks like, right? Same way you know that my parents' car is out there in a parking lot? He frowned, but he was still listening. No matter what a story was about, the important thing was to tell it well, with conviction. So I waited, she said, in the bushes, there, just around the curve. More than one afternoon, if you want to know the truth, because she had to go by, and I figured the best time was right after dusk. He shook his head scornfully, but didn't, she noticed, interrupt. So no one would see me, and so she wouldn't have time to react. She was getting a little stiff and would have stretched, but didn't want to do anything to distract him. It's a funny thing about that curve, she said. It really is dangerous, but everyone always drives pretty fast around it. I guess because they know it's there, and don't think about it much. I mean, I go fast around that curve, don't you? He nodded, then frowned and pointed the gun. Play it out. So I waited, she said. I had a pretty good view, because I wanted to be able to see her coming in plenty of time. And I was trying to think, how could I be sure she would turn out of the way fast? Be sure she'd go right over onto the rocks there. He wasn't looking at her now, so much as watching her. Because I was only going to get one chance, she said. He watched her. A baby carriage, she said, and paused. I don't care who you are, no matter where you are, even if it doesn't make sense. If you see a baby carriage come out in front of your car, you're going to try not to hit it, right? Makes sense, doesn't it? Matt nodded a little. Right, she said. Press on. So I waited, and Thursday afternoon, right after dark, who should come speeding along? She paused, then nodded significantly. Yeah, so I timed it. Wanted to be sure she'd see it, but only after it was too late. I timed it, and then I pushed a carriage out there, and... She let herself grin with exquisite slowness. And she swerved, and she went right off the road, just like I thought she would. Matt was watching her with his mouth hanging open, although he probably wasn't aware of it. Good, keep going. I didn't bother looking down over what was left of the guardrail, Dorothy said, in case she hadn't been killed and only maimed or something and was looking up. And I just went out to the middle of the road, got the baby carriage, and carried it back through the bushes to my car so I could get rid of it. She paused, slightly longer than briefly. Evidence, right? She checked Matt's expression. He was frowning. But here's the problem, she said. The problem for you. I really didn't like her. I had it in for her. And yeah, she ran off the road, and yeah, it was because of me, and it didn't seem to matter. It wasn't a kick. It was just like, so what? I mean, you're right. You and I have absolutely no opinion about each other. So if you waste it on me, take the chance. It's just stupid. If you have to do it, make it someone you hate. Try to make it worth your time and trouble. Make it worth the risk. It was quiet again. Nice story, he said, then cocked the gun. Now, put your hands behind your head. She'd really thought she'd had him going along there. I can prove it, she said as he started to get up. He stopped. Because, keep that brain working quickly. Even when you're sure you thought of everything, you haven't. He eased back down, but kept the gun cocked. So prove it. She hit the carriage, Dorothy said. So if the police or, I don't know, whoever, checked the bumper, they'd find paint or metal chips that weren't from the guardrail. He shrugged. So? Slapped down the last card, full force. I'll tell you where the carriage is, she said. So, if I went to the police and said you came in here and threatened me, you could easily tell them I was lying about it because you knew about Mrs. Crichton. He narrowed his eyes at her. It's perfect, she said. This way, we're both off the hook. We can both go home and pretend this never happened. Yeah, right, he said, like I'm going to fall for that. Yes, he was. I threw it off the bridge, she said, up near the point, because even when the tide goes out and it's just marshy, there's so much junk down there I knew no one would notice. He frowned, but indecisively. I know you're lying. We can drive up there, she said. After school tomorrow, I can show you. She almost had him here. She could feel it. So she paused again. And if you want, she paused again, I'll tell you about the others. There was no question but that his eyes widened. The others? Hook, line, and sinker. Seems to me, she said, that there's been more than one accident in this town in the last couple of years. Remember to pause. I can tell you all about them. I know you're lying, he said, but without much assurance. She shook her head. No, you don't. Admit it. You know I'm telling the truth. He looked at her, studied her. You know I am, she said quietly. There was another long silence, and then finally he nodded. Next stop, National Poker Championships. Yeah, she said, I'll tell you about all of them, and then maybe you and I can do another. Together. He looked at her, started to grin. What the hell, she said. Maybe it would be more fun that way, if you had someone to share it with. The phone rang suddenly, and they both jumped. What's that? He asked nervously. She checked her watch. My parents, because I'm running late. The phone rang again. Look, get out of here, she said. You can't do anything now because they'll know it wasn't a robber. Get out of here and we can talk at school tomorrow. The phone had rung again, and then again. Go, she said. Don't be stupid. A fifth rang. He nodded, getting up, and she got up too, answering the phone. Indeed, her mother. Oh, hi, Mom, she said. Yeah, I was down in the basement getting straws and napkins and all. She motioned toward the door, and Matt nodded. Tomorrow? He said. She nodded. He nodded, and he left. Left. All right, nice talking, Tex. She explained to her mother that she was still cleaning up, was almost done, and got permission to stop by Jill's to watch the end of Miss America. Then, once she'd hung up, she went over and locked the door, took the keys and put them in her pocket, lowered the lights. She should probably call the police, or have told her mother, but tell them what? That the right tackle on a football team suffered from psychosis, had a violent fantasy life, was just plain wacko, that he'd broken a muscular dystrophy jar? All she wanted to do right now was get out of here. Then she could worry about how to handle the situation. She swept up the glass and pennies, left a note for Howard that the jar had fallen, and put the change in an empty box that had once held cans of whipped cream. She took up the chairs, mopped the floor, turned the lights off, and the alarm on. It was 10:15. Seemed later. She went out to the parking lot and sat in the car. Sat, taking deep breaths, seeing her hands still shaking with reaction trembling. That had been scary. Really, really scary. Unbelievable, in fact. And she wasn't quite sure what to do. If she should just go home or... She started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, driving slowly and cautiously on the ice, headed toward Jill's house. Jill's little brother Timmy let her in. You're late, he said cheerfully. You missed the question and answer section. Dorothy nodded. Yeah, I know. She in the den? Yep, he said, and offered her his bag of Doritos. No thanks, she said, and headed for the den. Jill was sitting there, alone, wearing her reading glasses, her French book open, and completely ignored on her lap. Hi. Hi, she said. Dorothy nodded and sat down in the easy chair. Miss Nebraska had a really nice gown, Jill said. Dorothy nodded, trying to figure out exactly how to explain what had happened tonight, exactly what to say. But her hair was stupid. Jill glanced over for a second. You all right? Yeah, tonight, while I was closing up, she should just start. Tell her the whole twisted story. Look, she let out her breath. We have to do it again. Now, Jill looked away from the television. What? Yeah, Dorothy said. Jill glanced at the television, then took her glasses off. We can't. She was going to be the last one. Yeah, I know, but... Dorothy sighed. This will be the last one, okay? Jill nodded too. You sure? Dorothy nodded. Okay, Jill said, and closed her French book. When? Preferably an hour ago. After school tomorrow? Dorothy said. Jill thought about that, then nodded. Okay. Who is it, anyway? Matt Wilson, Dorothy said. Jill grinned. Whoa, that must be a long story. Very long. Dorothy nodded. Well, tell me at the commercial, Jill said, then looked at her. This is going to be the last one, right? Dorothy nodded. Good, Jill said, and put her glasses back on. Then they both looked at the television. This has been a Nightfall Audiobooks production of The Boy Next Door by Ellen Emerson White. Hi, this is Chris with Nightfall Audiobooks, and thank you very much for joining me for my production of The Boy Next Door by Ellen Emerson White. This was a lot of fun. You take some regular plain Jane girl, give her a job, put her in an ice cream parlor after school, and you take the boy next door, the guy that is so innocuous and so regular and so non-existent, and give him the motivation to want to kill somebody, to see what it's like, because the town is so small and everyone knows each other, and people are just looking for a way to experience something. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad or anything. They just want to do something different on Friday night. So Dorothy tells Matt this ridiculous story of how she killed Mrs. Crichton, and he believes it, and she goes, we can kill someone together, we can experience this together, we can be partners in crime, and the moron believes all this stuff. He doesn't actually kill her. He doesn't pull the trigger and make it look like a robbery like he intended. He believes her, and he wants to know more about all her previous victims. So she gets away with it. She manages to trick this guy into thinking that she's a real killer, and so he leaves because he wants to learn more. But then there's the twist at the end. It's not just her. It's her and her best friend, Jill. They are the murderers. Maybe Matt was right in that Dorothy is some plain Jane-looking girl and no one will really care about her, and she will barely be a footnote in the yearbook if she dies. But that also makes her the perfect killer, because who would ever suspect her? So it's not just the boy next door, it's also kind of the girl next door, too. This was a lot of fun. I did not expect a twist ending. That was really good. I would love to read more from Ellen Emerson White, and if you have any suggestions, feel free to send them my way. So what do I read next? I don't know. Send me an email, nightfallaudiobooks@gmail.com. I am at home right here on YouTube, at Nightfall Audiobooks. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that join button to show your support. Any help is greatly appreciated. I really do mean that. I also have a Patreon page, patreon.com/nightfallaudiobooks. So tell your friends, tell your mom, tell whoever you think would like to listen to me tell them tales of horror. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time.